This is Laura London, and you're listening to Speaking of Jung. Joining us today for episode 102 is Jungian analyst and author Dr. Nancy Qualls-Corbett in Birmingham, Alabama. Born in 1932, she began her career in nursing and went on to study psychology at the University of North Alabama, where she earned a master's degree in counseling. She then trained as a Jungian analyst at the C.G. Jung Institute Zürich, earning a diploma in analytical psychology, which is the degree of a Jungian analyst, in 1981. She went on to continue her education, later receiving a doctorate in analytical psychology from the Union Graduate University. Having a penchant for acting since high school, she played Judge Hester Solomon in the Alabama Tri-Cities Little Theater production of Equus by Peter Schaffer. And in 2012, she participated in a reading of Elizabeth Clark Stern's play Out of the Shadows, a story of Tony Wolfe and Emma Jung for the Jung Society of Atlanta. Dr. Qualls-Corbett served for many years on the faculty of the New Orleans Jungian Seminar and held several positions with the Interregional Society of Jungian Analysts, having sat on their executive, review, admissions, and ethics committees. She is the author of 2 titles from Inner City Books, The Sacred Prostitute, Eternal Aspect of the Feminine, published in 1988, and Awakening Woman, Dreams and Individuation, published in 2002. An interview with Dr. Qualls-Corbett appears in Volume 2 of Living with Jung by Robert and Janis Henderson, and her essay, Redeeming the Feminine, Eros and the World Soul, was published by Fisher King Press in the book The Dream Its Amplification, edited by Jungian analysts Erel Shalit and Nancy Swift Furlotti. Dr. Qualls-Corbett has lectured throughout the United States and, combining her love of mythology and travel, has led seminar groups in Greece, Egypt, Italy, and France. She is a noted lecturer on Mary Magdalene, Dionysus, and the Villa of Mysteries. In 2021, she presented a 4-part series on Mary Magdalene for the Friends of Jung South. Her lectures included Mary Magdalene and the Da Vinci Code, Despairing Love, Why We Need a Penitent Whore, and Our Psychological Symbols from Science and Theology. Please visit the website speakingofjung.com for more information on everything discussed in this episode. This interview is being recorded on Wednesday, January 26th, 2022, through the magic of Skype. Dr. Qualls-Corbett, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Laura, this is a pleasure, truly. Thank you.
You trained as a Jungian analyst at the Jung Institute in Zurich back in the late 70s and early 80s. What do you remember about that time?
Well, certainly it was a time of awakening for me. First time that I had lived out of the Deep South in Alabama and learning a whole new culture. And certainly being introduced into deeper Jungian thought. It was truly a special, special time.
And what drew you to Jung and to make that journey, across the Atlantic and to move to that foreign land to train?
That was a really strange happening. My husband and I, who was a pediatrician there in Sheffield, Alabama, and I joined a group of study of Jung. It was from out of Center Point, which was connected to the Episcopal Church. And we studied, we had both, had been he in his medical practice and so forth, and I, with psychology, had both been introduced to Jung, but deep theories we didn't know very much about. Mm-hmm. So Centerpoint allowed us teaching us those, introductory kind of thoughts. And we were intrigued. And then the group decided they would like to be analyzed. We had no analyst in Birmingham or at Alabama at that time. And so Murray Stein was in Texas then, Houston, Texas then. He had just finished his diploma in Zurich, and he agreed to come over and be our analyst once a month. So we began our analysis again. That deepened our understanding. And then a really strange thing, how we got to Zurich, was that, and I remember it well, we had 5 children, and they were very close in age. So, and this was around the time that they would all be leaving for Zurich. For college. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I was a stay-at-home mom and cooking meals and so forth. One night, all the children were out, so I was just cooking for my husband and myself, and realized I didn't have a pan small enough to cook for 2 people, and I was laughing about it, and told him then at dinner time, I said, "This is what happened." I said, "We've got to be planning the rest of our lives here. What would you like to do?" And he immediately said, "Move to Zurich," meaning to continue with the Jungian training. Mm-hmm. And I was astounded and delighted too, and it was truly a change of life. Giving up his medical practice and our leaving home and as we had known it, and our big family and so forth. So it truly was a new beginning, a starting again for both of us. Mm-hmm. And we both went through the program together.
Did you? And then you returned to Alabama and you both started practicing as analysts.
Yeah, we went, when we finished, then we did come back. We wanted to be close to our children. They were still in the South, and, so to practice here in Birmingham.
While you were in Zurich, is that when you met Marion Woodman? I mention her because she wrote the foreword to your first book, The Sacred Prostitute, which we're going to be discussing here today. How did you meet Marion Woodman?
Yeah, she was a student. She was, I think, a third-year student finishing up when I arrived, but I did know her and meet her, and then certainly was afterwards that when she was in Canada, and when we both finished and moved back and started practicing, and she had been writing quite a bit. I was familiar with her writings, and I loved what she had to say. And so we asked her if she would do the opening, the introduction, and she very kindly obliged.
The opening to your book, The Sacred Prostitute, which was published by Erel Sharp, who was also in Zurich at the time. When did you meet Erel?
Well, I met him in Zurich also. He was a student there. Again, he was, I think he was a year older, a student. And he, I don't know, just... It's a very, very close community, so and dear friends. So that's how we met.
So let's get into the book. I said it's a classic in the field, in the Jungian field. When I had started to promote this episode with you, I got a lot of comments from people who were very excited to hear you on this podcast talk about the book. And I've had the book for quite some time, and I wasn't able to track you down. And it was through Melissa Werner, who was my guest in episode 97, who that's how you and I got in touch. So the Sacred Prostitute, Marion Woodman, as I said, wrote the foreword, and she opens the book with the question, what is it in me that's drawn to this material? So I would like to ask you, why do you think this book gets such a huge reaction, and a positive reaction, and I mean, maybe other reactions, I just haven't seen them, from people? What is it in us that is drawn to the concept of the sacred prostitute?
Well, first of all, I would say the unknown. I mean, yes, there's a kind of a sexy quality and quality there, too, perhaps, but it's really a dichotomy in our world, in our thinking, and so that was. That's what I think. It's really what's this about? You know, how can the sacred and sexual come together? And that's been everybody's question for many years, eons. You know, so she's the image to me that carries both the erotic and the spiritual, the physical and our spiritual life, you see. Both come together, are united in her. And that's what makes her so rare.
So rare. And in the foreword, Marion Woodman mentions that we are unconscious of the divinity that is inherent in matter. So would you talk a little bit about that split between spirit and matter?
Yes, and it's very much more today that I think we do not understand really the life-giving force of our nature, our matter around us, which is, it's spiritual in that sense, the life-givingness of it. And we negate that, just as we negate other duties that we have here. So that's, and kind of the loss of love of nature, true love. So I think that's what Marion was talking about, and certainly what I see is very much a part of what the Sacred Prostitute represents too.
And you say it's about the archetype of the divine feminine. So would you tell us what that is?
Okay. Well, certainly in mythologies, I mean, going way back beyond even the Greek mythology and the Roman mythology that we're more used to. They were goddesses. They were divine. I mean, they were gods and goddesses. Both were divine. The feminine also had a place of divinity in people's hearts. Mm-hmm. She wasn't shut out. She was upheld. And, in most of those beginnings were the goddess of earth, which were, had to do with fertility. It had to do with procreation. It had to do with the lay of the land and where our food came up. And that was worshipped. And she was seen certainly as sacred. So, goddesses like Ishtar and Astarte and, from way back Syrian motifs that, but we didn't have it. Growing up, when I was a real child, my bedtime stories were Greek myths. They weren't fairy tales. And so I had a real kind of attachment to these stories as my dad would tell them to me at bedtime. But then also growing up in, I said, a small Alabama town in a Southern Baptist church, there were no goddesses.
Yeah.
There was no, and I think that was a yearning of mine since early beginning. Where are our goddesses? And then, after adulthood and reading more about that, in seeing, yes, there were, and in the temples, and where the sex was procreated after the prayer to the goddess. And then, so that, that was a true spiritual ritual, which incorporated the sexual act, but it was also very much a spiritual ritual. And the people of the time, way back BCE, were that held their life together, as it would be, and have very much a part of that. So I wondered where that went, that worship of the goddess went, and why it had to go, and those things. So all in all, it just, I must have lived with this for a long, long time.
Yeah.
The wondering, the questioning, what's happening here to us. So that's kind of how she grew up, I think.
You say we've lost our connection to the genuine feminine. So we have the light side of the feminine. For one, I grew up as a Roman Catholic, and in my bedroom as a child, I had a statue of the Virgin Mary. And I always remember thinking, okay, so she's a mother, but she's a virgin. And right. So why? And then I thought, okay, well, that's real. And then I thought, well, how come there haven't been any other mothers who were virgins? Why just her? And so I started wondering what's really going on here, and how is this affecting my image of women and of myself? And so
that's the big question. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So you say your purpose is to bring to conscious awareness aspects of feminine nature which have been misunderstood, devalued, or lost to the unconscious. And I think that's a really important point. So we're looking at this from a Jungian perspective. So what is going on as far as how this is in the unconscious now, and so it's spilling out?
Yes, hopefully it is that we are becoming more conscious of the feminine principle within us. But you referred to earlier as the divine feminine archetype.
Yeah.
You see, now this is part of it. And where is it that we elevate these feminine attributes that we have, not just sexual, but where can we elevate the whole sense of the spiritual aspect of the feminine, which belongs to love, it belongs to wisdom, it belongs to joy. Really the crucial things that our life would be made of.
So the divine feminine as the Virgin Mary, there's something you say conspicuously lacking. And why, I know why is not a great question, but it's my favorite question. Why or how did that happen in our Western Christian religions where the feminine is pure only and she doesn't have sex? And so I'm bringing this up because I think it's really affected our culture here in the United States, that there's this split. And I remember when I was taking a women's studies class in college at the University of Washington, and I remember on a test, it asked us to explain the whore-madonna split. And I remember getting that question wrong. That's how foreign that was to me, that I didn't understand what was going on there. So would you talk a little bit about that?
About the whore-madonna split?
Yes.
Did you? Okay. Well, here again, it has to do with the feminine sexuality. If you're a virgin, you're pure. If you've had sex or meaningless sex, not for procreation, that you're a whore, meaning you are demeaned and debased. So what it is doing is negating a woman's sexuality. It is negating completely the feeling of what lovemaking, and I don't mean having sex. I would really, really separate those two terms.
Okay.
Having sex and making love. They're different. So it's just, they see her as just having sex. There's no sense of the loving touch, the loving kindness, the loving feelings, instinctual feelings that can be transmitted through lovemaking. So it is, what it does, I think, well, we can look at it another word. Virgin, as we normally think, which means asexual. But if we look at the word virgin in another way, meaning pure, or in this case, which I love Esther Harding's phrase, one in herself, meaning that she's not contaminated. That's another word of seeing the word virgin. But I don't think the patriarchy, when they put that on the Madonna, meant it just meant that she didn't have sex.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think that happened? That's what I'm curious about. Why did they split the feminine into kind of two categories, the virgin and the whore? Why not the whole feminine, the complete, the genuine feminine?
Well, because the patriarchy couldn't stand it at that time. I think why they negated sex life almost throughout all of our teachings. Were they so pure? No, I don't think they were. They were simple people, but they were making, and this is when the patriarchy was really, really coming strong. I mean, with the Roman Empire moving in and all of that, they negated that aspect. They're frightened of it, I think. Men fear, in sex they lose their strength, lose their willpower. There's a fear of sex also, I think. Yeah. I mean, where it's exciting and it's absolutely, exhilarating. But there's also a fear behind it that I'll be taken in by it.
You ask these questions in the book, in the beginning of the book, The Sacred Prostitute. You say, why is woman's sexuality so exploited, so debased, when once it was revered? How can men come to know and to value the deeper meaning of femininity? And why is sexuality cut off from spirituality as if they were opposites? So women's sexuality went kind of underground, and there were these prostitutes. And my question is, why was there such a need for prostitutes back then?
Well, like there is still today.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Right.
Yeah, but no, it's truly a physical need, and then that has to be expressed. The thing about it is, love is not expressed in it. It's just meeting a physical need.
With women, if we were more complete and whole, then we would express all of that, and there wouldn't be this split off kind of group of women who are performing prostitution, and men too, I would assume. If we were whole, we would be all things. And so women's sexuality in our culture is exploited, and it used to be revered. So I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about that, of how it's so exploited today.
Oh, well, in many ways. First of all, yes, I think women are very much equally to blame. It's just not the masculine seeing the attributes of the feminine. And women also, they want power. They want control. They want money. They want those things too. And so they entice the man sexually, and in that sense have power over him. And I think so they contribute also to this sense of debasement. The women who have sex not for lovemaking, but for ego demands.
That reminds me of that often repeated quote of Jung's about power and love. Jung said, where love rules, there is no will to power. And where power predominates, there love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other.
I think it was just as we were talking about, where there's Eros, meaning love, deep love, power negates that situation. If I want power, that's an ego thing. But if I want love, that's that's wanting or fulfilling my whole body. It's fulfilling my psychic life. It's fulfilling emotions all over the place. So, yes, they are completely different. Love and power.
Let's bring in Jung's concept of the anima and the animus and how this relates to the sacred prostitute.
Jung's theory of anima and animus as being the counter-sexual side in each individual. So if I'm a woman on the outside, I also have a masculine aspect in my psyche. The feminine archetypes are there too, but the masculine, and that's called the animus in a woman, the masculine side. And the animus is a Latin word meaning spirit. And then there is, in the male, the countersexual part is called anima. And in Latin, that means soul. So it's talking about a woman's spirit, and it's talking about a man's soul. Now, through our growing up and experiencing life and all of that, these archetypes change shapes or seem to grow too. So there, as Jung has described them in 4 stages. First, for the anima, the first stage is the masculine. Now, let me precede this by saying, now, this is the image of her own, of a woman's own animus or male side, which is then projected onto a literal man. And how she is attracted to what kind of man depends on her own projection of what stage her animus is in. And this would be the same for a man and an animal too.
That there are stages.
There are stages, yes. The first stage for a woman, animus, is he is a hunk. You know, he's just a big, strapping, good-looking man. Close to the earth, that kind of feeling. The second stage would be the more Romeo type. He would be, very sensitive. He would be open to love. He might not be there quite yet, but he's more, he's more there for her.
Mm-hmm.
The third stage of animus then comes as we see it projected. It's, something more individuated, more likely to be seen. He would be something of a professor or a poet or someone or a priest, maybe somebody that's experienced in more than just ego. And the last stage is like a shaman. He's mystical and magical and really spiritual. So he's almost unembodied type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the stages that a woman goes through in seeing her projections onto another, and the gift of animus, where he brings in certainly creativity, brings in beautiful sense of one's spiritual nature, the sense of depth, the sense of psyche. So it's weaving the two together and seeing, kind of exploring what's on the outside, what do I see at the outside, but also exploring the inner life of my own masculine life. What is my animus, certainly at the stage that he is now? You know, what is he telling me? What is he instructing? How does he excite me? How does it, come to being? And that really, really creative aspect of a woman's life. And that's for any questions on the woman, or shall we go to the man now, and the anima?
Yeah, let's go to the anima. And you actually outline this in the book on page 102. So what are the stages of the anima?
Well, again, we're talking about the projections that a man sees on the outer woman. In the first, she's like we've been talking about. She's a whore. I mean, she's just sex. That's what a woman. I mean, that's what he looks at a woman.
Yeah.
About what kind of sex will she give me, or something of that sort. You see, she's just pure sex. I think Jung refers to her as Eve. And then the next stage would be one of beauty, and I think Jung calls her Helen. Is Helen of Troy, beauty and refinement and more of that thing that she brings in love and beauty, but there's something very tender there also. So we see that. And then the next stage would be, as he refers to, as Mary, the mother. It's just more spiritual feelings. Something greater than. But yet with a loving, very, very loving, tender, caring aspect. That kind of love, you see. And then in the fourth stage is Sophia, what he terms as Sophia, or wisdom. Like Sophia, who, in the Bible, she was the bride of God. So, I mean, she's absolutely full of wisdom, of earth's wisdom, our universe wisdom. Not knowledge, perhaps, or learning, or left brain stuff. This is right brain. What is the feeling of the universe? What is the feeling of the God's wife's love, you see? That, how how do I incorporate that into my own being, my own sense of my spiritual life? So that's, to me, is how the anima, animus is then differentiated. But the most important part is for each individual to see and find and acknowledge their countersexual self.
So now these stages are happening internally, and as you said, they're projected. And does this happen naturally to everyone? Does everyone go sequentially through the stages as we age, as we mature, or do some people get stuck?
Well, some people don't want to go. They want to stop. And this is the repeating and the repeating and the repeating of, we see, marriages or anything of that sort, you see, that it gets to a certain point, the projection dissolves, so they cut it off with that personal woman or man. And then, but it can't grow. The ego hasn't assimilated. The ego has not incorporated this new image of woman. The ego doesn't want it. It's afraid of it.
Yeah.
And so it then returns to the old ways. And that's how we see this kind of life that just doesn't seem to go anywhere. It just keeps repeating and repeating and doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'd like to move ahead to Mary Magdalene because you've done a lot of research on her. And last year, you gave a series of lectures for the Friends of Jung South, a series of Zoom lectures. There were 4 of them, and the first one was titled Mary Magdalene and the Da Vinci Code, Revisioning the Divine Feminine.
Yeah. Well, it was Dan Brown's book of the Da Vinci Code when it came out, and it was such a such a hit and such a change in what we've been reading. But a novel, and then a movie was made of it, and it was about that. I mean, quite different from our Christian teachings. This was a book about that, really, and not known to everyone, but Mary and Jesus were married, and they had a child, and they went to, this was after the child was born, after the crucifixion and resurrection, but that was when Mary and Joseph of Arimathea, I think it was, that took her then to Egypt, where the child was born, and then later on they went to France. There's a place on the coast of France that's called Maria de la Mer, which is Mary by the Sea. And there's a beautiful chapel there. When they went to France, they told the story that the young girl was a maid, a servant, because she was black. And also to keep the bloodline safe. So then that we see even today in Maria de la Mer, this beautiful chapel, cathedral of Saint Callie. They called it Callie, meaning black. And that was it. Now, she hasn't been canonized by the Catholic Church, but the people there have beautiful statues of her, and it's a big celebration every day. So this is part of the Da Vinci Code, this new child, and what happened to her, and what happened to Mary, actually, too, throughout the remaining years.
Okay, and I just want to circle back for a minute. You said she was black. What do you mean by that?
Her skin was black.
Mm-hmm. Because Jesus and Mary Magdalene were...
I don't know why her skin was black, but that was what they called her.
They were dark complected.
Dark complected, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this child was black. And does this tie in at all to the Black Madonna or no?
Well, it certainly has strings there, yeah. And I think, though, that it was, it was the people's choice to make her different, to stand out, and they wanted her black. Now, whether the child was actually black or I don't know, but they called her Callie, the statue there, St. Callie. And so anyway, the story of the Da Vinci Code just goes on to tell the different aspects that they met with, trying to locate this true image, not only of Callie, but of what Mary Magdalene was and where it was that her secrets might be found. And it was a search for her secrets, really, and for her body, which all over France and I think northern England and Scotland are burial places, places in which they have burial places for her. And you see those in different chapels around, particularly southern France and northern England and Scotland. So that's the story. And of the Da Vinci Code. And so we just took up some, when we say revisioning Mary Magdalene, we were looking at different stories that we didn't know about her.
Yeah, and you bring this up because the book became a bestseller. And it was huge. And then the movie became a blockbuster. And so why this interest in this alternative version of the life of Jesus that he indeed married? And he was married to Mary Magdalene, who we all thought was a prostitute. And yet there's this intense interest. Yeah. And it reminded me of the big reaction and the intense interest around your book, The Sacred Prostitute.
Yes, it is. It's well, I think the interest was created because it was so out of whack from what we'd been taught all our lives. There, you're speaking about the Sacred Prostitute in Mary Magdalene. There is it was published in 2006, I think. And it's about seeing, the name of the book is The Secret Teachings of Mary Magdalene. And quite a beautiful book. The authors of it are Claire Normand and Margaret Bailey. But they bring in many ideas, new ideas about Mary Magdalene. One of them is that she was a sacred prostitute before she went living in Israel. And she was a sacred prostitute at the temple of Isis. And they were very educated by the essence. And actually, the sacred prostitutes, that they were really revered in the civilizations that where the goddess temples were.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so much so that they could be educated, and that also that they could own or inherit land of their families, which other women could not do. So they were really quite chosen.
So they were revered at the time and not thought of the way we think of them. So your research into Mary Magdalene, you say her image has been tampered with. And yeah, what do you mean by that?
Oh, the image has been tampered with. Well, first of all, that she really was a miraculous person, a wonderful woman. I mean, all of that. And I guess the worst debasement that a woman could achieve would be called a whore. You know, they used to stone them to death. So it's, you know, that's the debasement that we see, that a woman's sexuality cannot be accepted for anything other than, you know, to please a man and forget about her. So it has nothing to do with the love and deep feelings that can be transmitted into the other's life. Actually, that's what the temple of the sex prostitution was about, that the love of the goddess could be instilled through the act of lovemaking, and the sacred prostitute could be instilled to become alive within the man. So that was their beginnings.
Yeah.
And we don't have anything like that today.
Right. And what is the result of that? What's the fallout from us not having that today?
Well, I think the same thing is we find that sexuality is not making love. Sexuality is just getting rid of some impulses. But what is being missing is the whole connection that one has to one another, that kind of spiritual deepness and relatedness and feeling another's feelings as it would be. Knowing where the other person is coming from and understanding that and loving that. We don't have that. Certainly it's there, but in our collective society, that's not being transmitted.
one of the other lectures that you gave is titled "Why We Need a Penitent Whore," and in that talk, you answer that question, and I love your answer. What did you say?
Well, I think, particularly for a woman, she needs to understand consciously where she is a whore. Every woman is in the dark side of her shadow element. Is in part a whore. And she uses her sexuality in order, as we talked before, to gain attention or power or money or whatever. And she does. Yeah, no, it's all over the films and
yeah, it sure is.
The TVs. It's right in our face all the time. And so, but the penitent whore is the one who understands her black shadow side and can, if she confronts it and sees it and not allow it just to act out whenever it jumps out, then she is more conscious, you see, of that. And that, so we need that penitent whore in order to become conscious of what our real whore nature is about and what it does and how it is destructive.
She's conscious.
Mm-hmm.
The fourth talk, the last talk you gave, is titled "Are Psychological Symbols from Science and Theology?" And I was really surprised to see you mention the Higgs boson, just the particle, the so-called God particle that was allegedly discovered at CERN several years ago. And you explain how symbolically it relates to Jung's archetype of the self. So how does that tie into this whole topic?
Well, yes. How is this little atom, I think smaller than an atom.
It's a subatomic particle.
Yeah. And so it is, first of all, it's the very basis of all matter. It's there in everything that's living out in our universe. And to know that that is also a part of ourselves and how we are therefore connected, all connected to one another and to our nature. We're not separate. We don't lord over. We try to, but we don't lord over our world per se. We are a small atom in this universe, each individual, but together we make it up. That sort of thing, I think, was important when I learned about that, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a difficult travel of individuation, of coming to know this counter-sexual side. It's a difficult way. Love is difficult, and usually in some way results in hurt, or dysfunction, or anxiety, or something of that sort, and can, until we understand that, yes, this is part of our growth, too. This is part of our understanding what love is about. So it's all of those things, I think, Laura, that we talked about, that we have to understand the parts of ourselves that are unconscious and to bring them into consciousness in order that we ourselves become more whole, more fully capable of being who we were designed to be.
At the end of the book, you say the missing attributes of the goddess can only be restored to the collective by each one of us in our individual way, enlarging our perception of the feminine. And that is from page 161 in the book, The Sacred Prostitute. We will be giving away a copy of the book this Friday, January 28th on Twitter. Follow me at Jungian Laura and Inner City Books at Inner City Books, and look for the tweet pinned to my timeline on Thursday. We give away a book every Friday on Twitter around 3 p.m. Central Time on Friday afternoons. The winner is chosen by random number generator, and it is open to addresses worldwide. This is a physical book that we actually send you. It's sponsored by the publishers, and this week it's Inner City Books. So I would like to thank you for your time today, and I appreciate you sharing all of this with us, Dr. Qualls-Corbett.
Well, Laura, I thank you. I thank you, and I enjoyed our conversation. I did.
Please visit our website, Speaking of Jung, that's JUNG.com, for more information on everything that was discussed in this episode. There you will also find all of the previous episodes of this podcast, which are available to stream or to download for free. Speaking of Jung is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. And it will be available later in the week on our YouTube channel, Jungian Laura. You can also listen to this episode on your Amazon Echo device, simply by saying, "Alexa, play Speaking of Jung on Apple Podcasts." Just be sure to pronounce Jung with a hard J. Links to Amazon's new Echo devices can be found in the show notes. So with very special thanks to Dr. Melissa Werner, to Anna Dudley and CJ Johnson with the Friends of Jung South, and to Inner City Books, this is Laura London, and you've been listening to Speaking of Jung.